start. Is the recording on? And
Yes.
welcome to Faith and Calm. This is our 63rd, I believe, our 63rd class. Tonight, the topic is going to be God is with us, which is also good to know. Very good to know. As I was talking about the Frierdiker Rebbe, he was clearly aware of that, and he accomplished where very few other people did. I mean, all the other rabbis left Russia by that time, 1927, and he realized that there were no teachers, and there were no Malamids, and there was no Shochtim, and there was in Judaism was at risk in Russia, and he created 600 underground yeshivas, and or he was warded. Eventually, they caught up with him and decided to put him in prison. And the yeshivas continued underground even after he had to leave the country. But, until they finally, after the Soviet Union was finally collapsed. Anyway, so we're going to talk a little bit about is God with us? And this is a very interesting from Bragg and I heard. I don't think I've ever gave this topic, but the Jew right now, we're living with the Parsha, living with the Torah portion, and the Jews are still in the wilderness. And wilderness, we're still in too. So sometimes it gets scary. Galus is not easy. And there's a story from the very beginning of when the Jews left Egypt. 1 month after they left Egypt, they came to a station, one of the stops on the way to Israel, called Matas Mariva, and they came to a oasis, and the water was brackish and wasn't drinkable, and they were all scared that they weren't going to die of thirst. They started complaining to Moses, and they were arguing, and they were saying the following. They said, "Im Hashem bikir beinu, is God among us? Is God with us?" And the rabbis all comment on the statement, saying it's when you know the situation, it sounds very strange. I mean, today you can always wonder, is God with me? And does he care about me? And is he involved in my life? But for the Jews who had just left Egypt 30 days beforehand, it shouldn't have been such a big doubt. 30 days beforehand, they had just seen the 10 plagues. They had seen the splitting of the Yam Suf, the Red Sea, and they were getting man daily. And it's like it sounds ungrateful, rude. I mean, what do you mean? Is God with us? The cloud of glory is traveling together with you. He's going to take care of you. So the Medrash explains, and it gives 3 different interpretations, which you wouldn't have thought is what their real question was. And then we're going to look at these 3 in the light of Chassidus, and we'll see what Chassidus actually teaches about. So the 3 opinions are come from Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Nehemiah, and the Rabbanim. Rabbi Yehuda said, they were asking, is God among us? Meaning to them, they said, if God is the God, is God the God of the whole world, or is he just the God of the Jewish people? If he's the God of just the Jewish people, we're not interested. But if he's the God of the whole world, then we'll serve him. Is God among us? I mean, in other words, is he only with us? And the rest is, he's a Jewish God. Second group, Rabbi Nehemiah gives a second opinion. He says, is God a kind of a God that can, like a proper king, who can provide for the food for the people without him having to be there? In other words, he set up the situation like Yosef in Egypt so that the Jews can provide for themselves, and take care of, like a proper king, He doesn't have to, or you don't have to personally go knock on his door to get your food. He sets it up so that you can you can work, you can find the food on your own. You have a system that you can get your food. And the third group, the Rabbanim, say, is God among us means, is he inside of ourselves? Is he inside? Does he know my emotions? Does he know my feelings? Does he know what's going on in my mind? Now, I mentioned these 3 things because these are 3 questions that people have today, and oftentimes very deep. They're very perplexing questions, And you hear them a lot in different forms and different manners, but they're basically all asking one of these three kinds of questions about Judaism. First one is asking, is God among us? Means, is God the God of the whole world, or is God the God just of the Jewish world? In other words, is Judaism basic? God is, it's a Jewish thing. You know, one guy came to a rabbi and he once said, you know what? Every group of people, they have their mishugash and there's craziness. And we Jews, we have our own family customs and so forth. And we have 613 commandments. Basically, Judaism is a Jewish thing. God is for a Jewish thing. He tells us that we keep shofar, we Shabbos, we blow shofar, we have Lulav and Esrog, we have Hanukkah and so forth. It's Jewish kind of thing. But in the rest, there's a big world out there. And many people these days, especially, they know that there's a big world. It's not just, God is not just about what goes on in the synagogue. There's a whole world out there. And it's interesting and it's exciting. And there's lots happening out there. I mean, you can go off to the east and you can learn about things like mindfulness, and you can learn about the law of attraction, and there's science and there's philosophy, and the question is, does this have anything to do with God? It seems like, no, Judaism is about something that, you do in certain communities. They do it full time, in Bnei Brak and in Crown Heights and in Lakewood and so forth. But out there in the world, it's a big world, and there's a lot of things happening. And it doesn't seem to have anything to do with, with Judaism, with God. And this is a very profound question, because people want to know, if I become more interested in Judaism, does it basically mean that I have to cut myself off from science, cut myself off from leading edge ideas, cut myself off from culture, cut myself off? I basically, it's a thing that you do, but you have to move away. Actually, I saw a news article just the other day. It was a rabbi, this nice guy, sweet guy. He was talking about, in Mexico, they're now creating a new city, a town, call it a town of Torah, city of Torah, where there will be people who sit there and do nothing but learn Torah all day. It will be completely devoted, isolated away from the rest of the world of Mexico, and they will just be involved in Torah all day. And he was raving about it. He thought it was a wonderful thing. And he's made it sound nice. But I was thinking, so God only exists when you shut off the rest of the world. That's exactly not what this is what the Baal Shem Tov taught. This is not, no, if God is real and God is truth and God is reality, then God is not just found in these particular activities. God is there everywhere in the world. The Lubavitcher Rebbe made a passion for his whole career of trying to point out, he says, he calls it Torah's Chaim, Torah's Emes, Torah is the Torah of life, Torah is the thing. Torah is the blueprint of the world. And when you build a house with a good architect, he knows that everything is in the blueprint, everything about the building, everything about the structure. So if you want to know what is happening, what is suck the marrow out of any experience, if you want to learn anything about psychology, about philosophy, about science, about history, then you will actually find that in Torah. And Torah is where you find all of these things in its purest form. And you understand and you appreciate even your vacations and in work and every other and interactions with people. I mean, I'm seeing it all the time now where I'm at work every single day. The questions are really about things that, I'm dealing with non-Jews, and the questions are, I can spout these classes about faith and calm right there, because all the issues are exactly the same ones that we're talking about here. It's all crazy. It's nuts, and what is the focus? What is the goal? What is the objective, and so forth? And how do you figure yourself out? And it's just amazing, I've been given, these classes, and it's like I can just repeat them at work, and they appreciate it because it's just it's needed in order to know how to deal with the military up and the contractors and the vendors down and everything else. So it's really, the Rebbe said, the Torah is the vortex of the universe. And if you understand that, Judaism in York is really where it's at. It's the center of everything. There's a story that's told about the Rebbe Rashab, who was the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe. He had a cousin, a distant cousin. His name was Echad. If you know anything about Hebraic literature or pre the state of Israel, he was a Yiddish, a Hebrew writer. He took the name Echad, wasn't his original name. And he was a very secular Jew, very anti-religious. But he learned in yeshiva and Heder and so forth. And he knew he was not a stupid man. He was a creative person. Anyway, one time he came to visit his cousin, the Rebbe Rashab. They talked for a while. And after he came out, they asked him, so what do you think of this Lubavitcher Rebbe? And he gave a very interesting quote. He paraphrased a mimer, a statement of the rabbis, the Chazal. And the mimer, the rabbis say about certain characters in the Bible, like about Nimrod and so forth. They say about him, Yodea et habora u'machave l'mared bo. He knows his creator, and he intentionally rebelled against him. And some people just rebel because they don't know anything about God or anything else. But certain people, like Nimrod, Amalek, and so forth, say about them that they actually knew who God is, and they intentionally rebelled against him. So Echad Ha'am said about the paraphrase that it said about the Friedrich, about the Rebbe Rashab, he said, he knows the world. He sees what the world is, and he intentionally rebels against it, which is a unique kind of thing, you know? He knows what's going on in this world, and he sees what the emphasis, what the truth is, what's supposed to go. So that's the first question is answered is God among us? Meaning, is he only among us? No, he's everywhere in this world and in every activity that you do. And this is one of the lessons that the Baal Shem Tov taught. The second lesson is can God make a system where he provides, we don't have to be constantly dependent on him. In other words, some people's Yiddishkeit looks as follows, and they look like robots. Because you ask them, what do you do? Why are you doing this? And he says, because the rabbis told me to do this. If he has any questions, he goes back to the rabbi. And it sounds like there's nothing to him. I mean, he's just a robot following what the Torah and the rabbis tell him to do. And people say, I don't want that. I don't want to be like that. And they're actually quite right. Because God wants a relationship with us, with you, and with you, and with you, and with you. Personal relationship. And if you're not in the picture, if you're just a robot, if you're just a dead man walking, just following orders and so forth all the time, then there's no person there for God to have a relationship with. God wants to be connected with us. He wants people to be to utilize and to be who they are as individuals, and to connect as an individual to God. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe did the same thing. He couldn't stand people who were small-minded and thought of themselves as little nobodies. The Rebbe was a unique kind of leader. He's a unique kind of leader who wants to create other people to be leaders. He wants us to maximize who we are, our talents, who we are, and to become as big as we can possibly be. And this is many leaders in this world, so-called leaders, they want to put down everybody else. They want to feel big shots for themselves. And they want to be, thought of themselves, and the more smaller other people are, the more important it makes them feel. The Lubavitcher Rebbe said the opposite. He said, no, I want everybody to go away from Crown Heights. I don't want to need anybody. 9 people will be enough just so that I have a minion. I want people to actualize themselves, to become big and to become themselves. I was just here listening to another story about this, and it was talking about we were talking about the law of attraction at one point in time, and it was talking about Eov and how Eov is Job. And Job, at one point in time, I didn't realize it. He's complaining, when he lost everything. He had 10 kids, and he lost his wife, and he lost his children, and lost his money. And he remembers that that he was always worried that this was exactly what was going to happen to him. Because he had a custom many years earlier. Every day he had all of his sons and all of his daughters used to regularly make parties. Why? And he wanted them to always, to thank God at their parties. And he said, because why? Because he was afraid that, that they're not grateful enough to Hashem. And now this happened to him, and he says, this is exactly what I was worried about. And the rabbis say a shocking thing. They say because he was actually expecting terrible things to happen to him, it's one of the reasons this happened to him. Because God is your shadow. God is your shadow, and you know what a shadow is. Everything that you do, God reflects. So if you have these fears and these worries, then God sometimes it materializes, because that's the law of attraction. That's the law of Jewish law of attraction. And our emotions and our feelings actually cause an echo above. Now, the last question, I think, is the most interesting one. And that is God among us? Is he inside? Does he know my emotions and my thoughts? So Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson says, I'll illustrate this. That recently he got a letter from a lady in Europe, religious lady, 11 kids, many grandchildren, fine lady, a fine family, and so forth. And she was writing to thank Rabbi Jacobson for giving his classes on Hasidus. And she writes the following in her letter. She writes longhand, one of those longhand letters that nobody does anymore. She writes and she says, you know what? I thank you so much, because before your classes, I never knew that God and the Torah actually care about our personal experiences. I never thought the Torah was about that. I never thought that God really cares about how I feel, what I think about, or what emotions. She thought the Torah was about doing what God wants. God doesn't care what you feel and what's going on inside of you. It's an experience of laws. It's an experience of rules. You do what you're supposed to do, and then you get rewarded. She never realized that God is Bikir Benu inside of us. He cares about us. He feels for us. He's and everything in Torah is explaining to you that, your emotions and your feelings and everything else is part of a God. It's not two separate things. It's also part of the God's world, and he's very much present in it. To emphasize this, we take another teaching from the Baal Shem Tov, and the Baal Shem Tov explains it. He says that when later on in the wilderness, the Jews were saying, Moses was saying to the Jews, He ra'at et hamitzrayim hayom lo tosif lirot esem le'olam. Because you see the Egyptians today, you will never see them again. Baal Shem Tov explains it and says it seems obvious. If the Egyptians are dying, you're not going to see them again. Moshe was telling them a very important thing. You have to be able to look at your Mitzrayim. You have to be able to look at the things that you're afraid of. You have to look at your fears. You have to look at that and realize that although it's very difficult and it's sometimes very hard dealing with many matters in life, and accept that it's, it's painful and so forth, but nevertheless, there's godliness in there. There's a lesson inside of them, and you have to be able to look directly at it. And this is a tremendous psychological teaching from the Torah, teaching from the Torah, telling you how much therapy you could get from this by realizing that you have never to be afraid of anything that's holding you back. You don't have to be afraid of anybody or anything. It can be very hard. It can be very painful. That's true. But don't be afraid of it, because all of it is coming to teach us something. We're supposed to grow from it. There's coming from it, there's something positive to take away, something that we're able to give to other people. And this is a tremendous lesson from the Torah, is don't be afraid of anything. Baal Shem Tov was never afraid of anything. His father told him when he was passing away, when he was a little boy, he says, Yisrael, I'm passing away, you're going to be an orphan. But the two things I want. One is love every single Jew. And the second one is never be afraid of anything, anybody, anything in the world, because there's only one true reality in this world, and that's God. And this is what one of the foundational principles of Hasidus, and one of the foundational principles of what we teach in Torah. So let me give a little story.
Yecheskel Shimon, can you repeat that again, please? And did you say the Baal Shem Tov said that?
Baal Shem Tov was he was born at his father and his mother were at a very advanced age when they gave birth to him. And so when he grew up, he was taught by his father, who was a big hidden tzaddik, but his mother passed away, I think, when he was born, and his father passed away before he was 5 years old. And before the father passed away, he said, Yisrael, you're going to be an orphan, you're going to be by yourself. I'm passing away. I want you to know just two things. One thing is, Ahavas Israel, you have to love every Jew with all your might. The second one is never be afraid of anybody or anything. The Baal Shem Tov was never afraid of anybody or anything. There's stories about him, going, about fires in towns and animals attacking the town. And as a little boy, he wasn't afraid of anything. He used to spend his time in the forest. Everybody said it's scary there, and he was not afraid of anything or anybody. He really internalized his father's message, which is there's only one reality in this world, it's God, and you don't have anything to be really afraid of. Because the worry and the fears are not doing anything. You may have to do things to protect yourself. You may have to take logical reasons, but the anger and the worry and the fear, that's not accomplishing anything. So to give you the example is a story I heard, and I liked it very much. I thought it illustrates a little bit of it. I heard the story recently. There's a lawyer in New York. His name is Ben Bronfman. He's sort of famous for dealing with very high-profile what do you call them? Celebrity legal cases. He actually grew up religious. He wears a yarmulke. He's clean shaven, but he's a shomer Shabbos, keeps kosher, prays 3 times a day. His brother actually was a Rosh Yeshiva in Staten Island. Anyway, and now he's very involved in his Judaism. But he was always, always a very proud Jew as a lawyer. He still is a lawyer. He's now in the 70s. And he was telling a story. This video you can find on the internet. He's telling it to some gathering of rabbis or something like that. He's a big al chesed. He has a school that he funded in Israel, a cheder, and so forth. Anyway, he was telling the story. It says one of his clients was an interesting character. He represents all sorts of non-Jews and all sorts of characters. One of them was a guy named Puff Daddy. Puff Daddy, I guess, is his rapper, that's his acronym. And he's a very popular rap singer. And he got into a bunch of legal problems and, I don't know, some very serious situations. And so he was looking for a lawyer to represent him. And he came with this Ben Bronfman. And so he calls Ben Bronfman up. And he says, I would like you to be my lawyer. I hear you're really good at this. He says, okay, I'll be your lawyer. So the Puff Daddy tells him, and he says, okay, but if you're going to work for me, I'm going to need to have all your phone numbers, and you're going to have to be on call 24/7. Ben Bronfman says, you can have all my phone numbers, all my mobile numbers, home phone number, everything else, but it's going to be 24/6 because you can't call me on Shabbos. You can't call me on Shabbos. And this guy, Puff Daddy, he's actually a businessman. I mean, he has like 60 people working for him. He's not just, a rapper. He's got a whole entourage. So, he's saying to Pep, he says, no. Everybody who works for me 24/7, that's my rules. I mean, if you're going to work for me, Bronfman says, fine, go find yourself another lawyer. I work 24/6. I just don't work on Sabbath. And Puff Daddy says, but I want you. And he says, then you have to accept my conditions 24/6. That's the best you're going to be able to do. He says, oh, okay. First Friday night comes, Ben Bronfman comes back from shul. He sits down for Kiddush. The phone starts ringing. And it's ringing. And most people, they give up after, 10, 50, 20, 50 phone calls. This guy, he's calling 1,000 times. It just gets ringing and ringing. And he knows it's not an emergency, because there's no fax. There's nothing else there, and so forth. He would have gotten the fax from the office if it was an emergency. So he's I'm not answering. So the whole Shabbos, this thing is ringing. Well, 1,000 times it's ringing. And after Shabbos, Ben Bronfman calls up Puff Daddy. And he calls up Puff Daddy and he says, did you happen to call me last night? He says, yeah, I tried to. So Ben Bronfman says, well, I have to apologize, but I did tell you that I don't pick up the phone on Shabbos. Puff Daddy says, you don't have to apologize. So Ben Bronfman says, why? He says, because I made $10,000 on you. See, I told all my other homeboys, that this guy, he has morals, he has values, but he doesn't pick up the phone on Shabbos. They say, nah, you're paying him, he'll pick it up. So I bet him $10,000. So I won $10,000. I'm very happy about it. So there's a God in the world. There's a God inside of us. There's a God in our activities and everything that we do. It's there. It's present. You have to sometimes dig for it, but he's there, and he affects the world. He takes care of us, makes sure we get through our medical issues and our health issues and our family issues and everything else in our issues. It can be very scary, but you can look at it, you can look at it in the face, and you can be able to thrive in it. You can realize, you know what, there's some lesson in here. It may be very painful and very difficult, but I can through it. And this is the lesson of God is with us. God is with us. And this is what the Jews have been afraid of. And we have this fear too, you know, that he's not with us. But the fact is he's very much with us and very much present in us. It's just that sometimes it's behind curtains and concealments. And with that.
So if somebody has like a fear of heights, for instance, is there a lesson in that?
I'm sure.
I mean, basically, is the teaching that it's in all fears that people have, whether they fear that something's going to happen like that man did, or whether they fear.
Right. So sometimes it's just, you know, like I said, be careful and acknowledge yourself that you do have this fear of heights, right, or whatever else it is, of animals or dogs or whatever it is that, happens to be your fear and something like that. You don't have to hate yourself for that. I think the lesson is don't let it paralyze you, and don't let acknowledge it, accept it. It's part of who you are, and that's okay. But you don't have to let it rule your life. And many times we run away from things, and we spend a lot of energy, combating these fears, when really we're supposed to be, learning from it, growing from it, and perhaps we share it with your child or whatever. I have fears, you have fears, but you know what? We can do an awful lot even with our fears. And with that, I can
very, very nice. Thank you, Yasher Koach.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yafas Shimon.
Yep.
Okay. Stay tuned. Part 2. Okay. Thank you, Yasser Shimon. That's really awesome. Okay. So, welcome everybody. Good to see everybody.
Hi.
Hi, Emily. Hi, Esther. That you're here.
Hi, Shlomo.
Amy. Hi, Deborah. Hi, Sari. Hi, everybody. And does anybody want to say something before I begin? Well, I'm sorry for the glare on my glasses.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you. Nice to see you. Okay, good. Okay, so tonight we have a very good story, and the whole time that we're in is very important. So I'll begin quickly with the 3 things that I always say, which is that 4 things, which is that we're in a very exciting time. We're in a time where we're supposed to utilize our potentials to the maximum. The Rebbe told us, the Lubavitcher Rebbe told us in 1992 that we're entering the time of the redemption, and the things that are happening are because Mashiach is already in the world, and Mashiach is affecting the world. So we know that our souls were picked to be here at this time. We've been here before. Virtually everybody has been here at least once before, if not, if sometimes it's their 3rd time. And we know that we have tools. We have the Torah, which is, I didn't know about the Torah when I was growing up. I went to Hebrew school, but I had a very, what did you learn in Hebrew school? Very little.
Aleph Bet.
Pardon?
Aleph Bet, that's it.
Aleph Bet, yeah. And Ani Yoshev Al Hakisei, that's about it. And little did I know that there was this magnificent document called the Torah, and everything in the world is in it. It's the most amazing thing. So we have the Torah, we have leaders like Moshe Rabbeinu in his time, and the Rebbe in our time, and we have and what we do tonight by learning about this time actually furthers it. It actually speeds up the redemption. So, okay, good. So I want to talk a tiny bit about the time that we're in. Last Sunday was Gimel Tammuz, and tonight is an extremely auspicious day. Tonight, beginning now at sunset, it's called Yud Beis Tammuz. Gimel Tammuz, the Rebbe told, Gimel Tammuz, 1994, is the day that the Rebbe was buried. The Rebbe was, like I went to the funeral, right? And 12 Tammuz, we'll go on to that in a minute. But Gimel Tammuz, the Rebbe told us that in a remarkable talk 2 years to the day before Gimel Tammuz 1994, 2 years before to the day, the Rebbe gave an entire deep, gorgeous talk instructing us what Gimel Tammuz means, what that day is all about. And he said that, okay, I might have mentioned, I'm sure I mentioned this before, that when a day repeats itself in the Jewish calendar, it is not just, it's not, Rosh Hashanah is on Rosh Hashanah because it's an important, because there's an aspect of judgment in the world. There's a spiritual aspect of judgment. Yom Kippur is on Yom Kippur because there's a spiritual quality of forgiveness in the air. Your birthday is a special day, and when your Jewish birthday, and when it repeats itself, the same energy is present as it was at your birth. And so, what did the Rebbe say? A main character of Gimel Tammuz is? He said a main character is that it is the beginning of the redemption, but it's the type of beginning that will only be understood in hindsight. And the Rebbe spoke about other Gimel Tammuzes to illustrate his point. And the Rebbe before our Rebbe was called, in Yiddish, it's called the Frierdiker Rebbe. Frierdiker simply, it means previous, the previous Rebbe. Previous Rebbe was a remarkable person, remarkable. When he was born, he was soft, sensitive, sweet, the softest little, the sweetest, most sensitive. If his father told him he was doing something wrong, it would be so terrible for him. He was like, one time I think that there were 2 pieces of watermelon, and he gave his friend the bigger piece of watermelon. But after a little hesitation, a second's hesitation, and his father said, I saw the second's hesitation, and he said, he was so sensitive. He was arrested in 1927 by the communists for teaching Judaism, and imprisoned for many, many weeks under a death sentence, and brutally, they were brutal to him. They threw him down a flight of iron stairs. They put guns to his head. He had to walk down a place with people with rifles on both sides. They tortured him. They told him they put it right up to his temple. This toy will make you speak. And he said, I'm sorry, that little toy might mean something to people who only have one world and have many gods. But guess what? I have one God and I have 2 worlds. I'm not afraid of your little gun. If God wants me to go, God, I'm going to go, and you have nothing to do with it. And he was like a tiger. He was he was so strong from being such a sensitive, in Yiddish, the word is edel, such an edel kid. When the situation called for it, he was iron. And he wouldn't recognize him as an authority. He said, God is the only authority over my life. And if they told him, he was just really amazing. Anyway, so what happened? The Rebbe brought that story to illustrate something that happened to the Frierdiker Rebbe on Gimel, which means the 3rd day of Tammuz. On Gimel Tammuz, he was under a death sentence. He had been there for weeks. He was tortured, everything, and on Gimel Tammuz, they said your sentence is commuted to exile. We're going to send you to exile, to a far off place for a few years, for 3 years, and that is what it's going to be. And the Frierdiker Rebbe did not celebrate, and none of the Hasidim celebrated. And why? Because the communists were so mercurial. They were so unreliable. You never knew if they could change their minds in a second. They could shoot him when he got to exile. So they didn't know. That Gimel Tammuz was a confusing day. Is this good news or is this not? But then a little bit more than a week later, on the 12th of Tammuz, which is happening right now when the sun sets, it's going to be the 12th of Tammuz. He was told that he was going to be freed completely, and the next day he was freed completely. And after a lot of international lobbying. so the Rebbe said, now you see, when Gimel Tammuz happened, it was confusing. They didn't know, is this good? Is this bad? What's happening here? But then on the 12th of Tammuz, it became apparent that Gimel Tammuz was the beginning of the redemption. And the Rebbe said that it's an important point to know. So the Rebbe also spoke about another incredible event on Gimel Tammuz. The event was that, in Jewish history, who was the successor of Moshe Rabbeinu? Who took over after Moses?
Joshua.
Joshua. I told you this part last.
Yes, last week.
This part. I'm just because I want to. Yeah. Okay. Good. So Joshua Joshua talked to the sun and he stopped the sun, and because he was fighting a battle against the Gibeonites, and he needed more time because the sun was setting, and he didn't ask that that God should win the war for him. He just asked that the sun should stop, and so that the Jews can continue the battle. And this is also extremely significant. What is Gimel Tammuz about? Gimel Tammuz is about the Jews doing the ultimate steps to win the battle. So the Rebbe explained to us on the 28th of Nisan, before Gimel Tammuz, that he's turning over the job of bringing the redemption to us. And we learn from the story of Yehoshua that that's our job. That our job. The Rebbe is still helping us. Hashem is helping us, but it's our job. We have to be active, and we have to do what we have to do. Sorry, I speak in many forms, and sometimes I don't remember what I said. I speak in several forms. Anyway, so now to go on to our story for tonight. Our story for tonight took place in 1963, and And it happened to there's a rabbi. His name is Rabbi Gimpel, Rabbi Gimpel Orimland. It's hard for me to say. Rabbi Gimpel Orimland. He had studied in Israel under two very big non-Hasidic rebbeim. He was associated with the Chazon Ish and also with the I'm not sure what the other one was, but and under the Stipler Gaon. He was associated with the biggest people in the non-Hasidic world. Anyway, he moved to New Jersey at a certain point with his wife and 3 children, and and the grandparents, the grandmother, his mother, and his stepfather had taken out the 3-year-old and were returning him at night to the parents' house. And it was raining cats and dogs, and there was a terrible, terrible car accident. And the grandmother was thrown out of the window. The step-grandfather was killed instantly, and the 3-year-old sailed out the windshield and landed in a puddle on the pavement face down. And the grandmother was in terrible condition. But after a long time, she managed to roll and roll and roll and roll until she got to her grandchild and flipped him over, so at least his face wasn't in the water. When the ambulance came, they took them to the hospital, and the kid was in, as I said, the step-grandfather was dead, the grandmother was in terrible shape, and the kid was in awful shape. The kid had extensive brain damage. And when they called the parents to come to the hospital, it was ready, like it was in the middle of the night. It was like 3 a.m. And by 4 a.m, the doctor came out. His name was, he was a Jewish guy. And his name was Springer. And he came out and he said, listen, I'm going to tell you straight. Your child is in terrible condition. And there's no hope for him. And your stepfather, I understand he's going to have his funeral tomorrow. You're going to, you should make plans. You're going to be able to have a double funeral. And it was actually on the eve of Rosh Hashanah. And he said, maybe postpone the stepfather's funeral as far into the day as you can, because you're going to have a double funeral. And if you don't have the funeral before Rosh Hashanah, the child will be because of, in Jewish law, you don't bury on a holiday. Why should this child not be buried? And Rabbi Gimpel, Rabbi Orm, his first name was Gimpel, Rabbi Ormland, I'll get that name yet. Rabbi Ormland was like devastated. They were absolutely devastated. So, in an Orthodox community, it's a very tight society, and people share each other's pain, and they call each other in the middle. No, so somebody let the president of the shul know that this terrible thing was happening. Rabbi Ormbach was the Rav of the shul. And so the president of the shul ran to the hospital, middle of the night. And the president of the shul said, do me a favor, call the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And Rabbi Ormbach said, Lubavitcher Rebbe, what? I don't know of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I know of the Steipler Gaon. I know of the Chazan Ish. I'm not a chassid. I don't know this person. And also, okay, I won't go into details. So anyway, but the president of the shul, Mr. Gelman, said, call the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Your child is going to die in an hour. They told you that in an hour he's going to be gone. Call the Lubavitcher Rebbe. It's your only hope. He said, and finally he convinced him. He called for him. He gave him the phone. And by the time he called, it was like, whatever. And by the time all this happened, it was 4 a.m. already. Lubavitcher Rebbe was still working at 4 a.m, and his secretary, Rabbi Hodikoff, a brilliant rabbi in his own right, was still working. And the father told the story to Rabbi Hodikoff. There was extensive brain trauma. The child is almost certainly blind, deaf, and in a complete coma, just a mess, and hooked up to 1 million wires and 1 million tubes, not doing anything on his own. And so Rabbi Hodikoff said, okay, I'm going to tell the Rebbe. And he told the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he came back to the phone, Rabbi Hodikoff, and he said, the Rebbe says to call back in an hour. The father said, they told me I will not have a son in an hour. I will not have a son. What do you mean, wait an hour? And Rabbi Hodikoff was such a zealot for the Rebbe, so incredible. Rabbi, he got a little mad, and he said, listen, if you call the Lubavitcher Rebbe for help, why are you calling him? If you don't think if he tells you to call back in an hour, it means your kid is going to be around in an hour. If he says to call back, you can trust him. Call back in an hour. So Rabbi Ormland said, okay, I'll call back in an hour. He called back in an hour, and Rabbi Hodikoff said, the Rebbe wants to speak to you directly. The Rebbe got on the phone, and the Rebbe said in Yiddish, "Die Gezerah, good news, the Gezerah is ice." And what does it mean in English? The decree has passed. The decree is over. And Rabbi Ormbach said, what is going on here? What is he talking about? The decree is over. What's he talking about? And he said, but the Rebbe was excited. He said, the Gezerah is ice. You're going to have good news. This kid's going to live. You're going to have nachas from him. And I want you to do 3 things. Number 1, I want you to give $1,800 to charity. Not to Lubavitch, to anybody else, not to Lubavitch. And by the way, $1,800 was a magnificent sum of money back then. And the Rebbe said, if you don't have it, borrow it. That's what he had to do. Number two, give this child the name, an extra name. And the name should be Ben Sion. Now, it's a very unusual name to give. If somebody is on the edge of death, they usually give the name Chaim, which means life, or Raphael, which means healing. But Ben Sion, but the Rebbe said, give the name Ben Sion. And number 3, do me a personal favor. When this child gets better, let me know. People call me with all their problems in the world, and very few people call me back to tell me it all worked out. So do me that personal favor. And also, he had advice for the doctor. And I'm not going to tell you the advice for the doctor, but it was really amazing. It's astounding advice. The doctor didn't want to do it, and then the doctor did do it. And Rabbi Ormbach, while he was speaking to the Rebbe, somehow he felt calm. He felt like, wow, maybe something will happen. And so he said to the Rebbe, it's going to be Rosh Hashanah very soon. And I'm the Rav of a shul. And I not only lead the davening, the whole davening of Rosh Hashanah, but I blow shofar. I can't do it this year. I have to find a substitute. And the Rebbe said, oh, Adarabba, on the contrary, this year is your year that you have to daven more than any other year in your life. You have to go to shul, you have to daven. Your wife will remain in the hospital. Make sure that she, make provisions that she hears the shofar even in the hospital. And she should endeavor that she should get another woman to listen with her, because that will be another merit for her and for the child. And so that's exactly what they did. Rabbi Ormland said that he never davened like that in his life, because the kid was a mess. The kid was a total mess. He was alive, but a total mess. And when he left the hospital, and he said he soaked the cloth over the bima. He soaked it with his tears, and on the second day, the hospital sent somebody to the shul to let him know, guess what? Your child is out of danger. Right before he was supposed to blow the shofar, they said, the child is out of danger. Now, what did that mean? That meant that he started breathing on his own. It was a sign of life. He started breathing on his own. But, when he got to the hospital, he said, that doesn't mean that he almost, certainly he's going to be blind, deaf, mute, and paralyzed his whole life, whatever life he lives. But he's alive. He's breathing on his own. So the next thing that happened in this story is that Rabbi Ormland, you'll help me. For some reason, that name is so difficult for me. So Rabbi Ormland, somebody gave him advice to go to New York. He was in, I believe, something like Atlantic City. That's where they lived, in New Jersey. And somebody told him, go to a Farbrengen with the Rebbe. Now, the Rebbe would hold regular gatherings with thousands of Hasidim, would crowd into 770, thousands. You never saw so many people in one space. And he would talk for hours. He would give incredibly deep Hasidic discourses for hours on end. A small fact of interest, Yossi Jacobson, he's brilliant even as a child. And he was a Hoser Rishon, which meant there were a team of people. There was a woman's team also, but there were a team of people who listened to the Rebbe for hours on end and memorized every word. And afterwards, they got together and they wrote it out together. And if one person forgot something, somebody else remembered. And so anyway.
And Simon Jacobson, his brother, was too.
He was also, yes. Simon is like 9 years older than Yosef Yitzhak, but he knew how brilliant this little kid was, so he brought him in at 15 to the team. So anyway, so they said, go to a Farbrengen. It's a remarkable experience, just remarkable. So he went to the Farbrengen. One thing that they do at a Farbrengen, it's deep, incredibly deep Hasidus, and then beautiful, beautiful wordless melodies called nigunim, and they're punctuated, Hasidic discourse, nigunim, Hasidic discourse, nigunim, and during the nigunim, the Hasidim, they have these little shot cups, these little plastic shot cups, and they fill them with like probably vodka or something like that, and they hold it up to the Rebbe until the Rebbe sees them, and when the Rebbe nods, l'chaim, he tells them l'chaim, then that Hasid drinks, and the Rebbe doesn't, I don't know how he does it, whatever. And so he also had his little thimble full of vodka, and the Rebbe motioned to him, he pointed to him, and he said, get a real glass and come here. And so somebody gave him a real glass, and he walked up to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe poured something from his cup into the bottle, into the big bottle, and then he said, give me your cup, and he poured vodka into the regular cup, and he poured until he didn't stop pouring when the cup was full. He kept pouring, and the vodka was pouring over the sides. And the Rebbe said, this is because blessings are soon going to be pouring all over you. Now, when you sing a nigun, all the Lubavitcher Rebbes, all of them, originated nigunim. And so when they sing the nigun of a particular Rebbe, it's like summoning that person, that Rebbe's neshama from the higher worlds into the room. And the Rebbe said, drink, make a l'chaim. And he never drank anything like that in his life. And because the Rebbe said, do it, he did it. He drank the cup. And then the Rebbe filled his cup again. He said, do it again. And he drank the second cup. And then the Rebbe said, hold out your cup. And he filled it a third time. Now, so why? What is this thing about vodka? What does it have to do with anything? And okay, what does it have to do with anything? And you know, there's a Jewish expression, a Torah expression. When alcohol goes in, the secrets come out. And you know, it's true of mankind, right? When people get drunk, they'll spill the beans about everything. But when a Jew who's filled with Torah drinks, incredible, beautiful things come out, actually. And the Rebbe was about to make a request, and the Rebbe wanted Rabbi Ormland to speak from the depths of his being. The Rebbe said, in this room right now is the Alter Rebbe, the very first Chabad Rebbe, and also the Frierdiker Rebbe, my predecessor. They're in this room. And they are ready to bless you. And you need to speak up. You need to say, what blessing do you want? And why are you quiet? Speak up and you'll get their blessing. And so he already had 2.5 cups of vodka. And even though there were, you know, and he's a shy man, but after 2.5 cups of vodka, you can manage. There were thousands of people watching him. And he said, my kid, my son is a vegetable. And I want him to be completely healed. I want him to be completely healed. And the Rebbe gave him a big smile. He said, you got their blessing and you have my blessing and you're going to have good news. So he goes back to, Baruch Hashem, to the hospital. And a while later, sometime later, it's not the hospital anymore. The hospital said this guy's hopeless. We're moving him to a nursing home, and they'll just continue to give him, you know, food through the belly and whatever else, and through a feeding tube, whatever. You know, there's no hope for this person. And so his wife was sitting with the kid one time. The child's name is Yaakov Shmuel, and actually he was Yaakov Shmuel Ben Sion because they added the name Ben Sion. And the wife would sit there every day with him, and a new nurse who had never been there before, a new nurse who had never been on this ward before, on this floor before, whatever, comes into the room. She knows nothing about Yaakov Shmuel. She goes up to his bed. His eyes are closed, and she says, "Listen. What do you want with dinner? Do you want milk or soda?" He opens his eyes. He says, "Soda." The mother hears, falls into a dead faint. She's actually hospitalized for the next day and a half. This kid starts improving. Just like the Rebbe said, he starts improving one thing after another. He adds vocabulary. He's able to see. He's able to hear. He's able to do things. They have to teach him everything again from scratch, how to speak, how to everything. And he can feed himself. Everything is, as he said, I'm going to give you a link to part of the video. I saw it. I saw the father speaking and the kid speaking when he was an adult, and a beautiful video of it. And as the kid said, everything was terrific with me except for my legs. My legs were there was nothing. They were paralyzed. There was nothing. I couldn't stand. I couldn't do anything. All the physical therapy, as I was improving, as everything else was getting better, they gave me lots of physical therapy, but it didn't help. Nothing helped. They were like nothing. My legs were nothing. And so at a certain point, the Rebbe said to Rabbi Ormland, "Bring him to me. I want you to bring him to me." And so Rabbi Ormland managed. He brought him to the Rebbe, and he brought him into the Rebbe's room. And the kid had braces on the lower half of his body, completely in a wheelchair with braces. And the Rebbe said, "Have him get up. Have him walk to me." And Rabbi Ormland said, "He can't even stand. What do you mean walk?" And the Rebbe said, "If you want, you can leave the room and come back in a little while." And Rabbi Ormland left the room, and he was by now Yaakov Shmuel Ben Sion was 5 years old, and And they called the father back in, and Yaakov Shmuel ben Sion limped. Not, I mean, he walked with a little bit of a limp, but he walked back to his father. And after that, the kid got just absolutely better. He went back to yeshiva. Everything was fine. Now, the father had made a neder. He had made a legal promise when the kid was a vegetable. He had made a legal promise. If the Rebbe is right, and my kid is going to get better, then I am going to, if he lives to bar mitzvah, I'm going to make the bar mitzvah like Sheva Brachas, and it's going to be 7 days long. And the day came of the bar mitzvah. The Rabbi Ormland kept his promise, and Rabbi Ormland asked to speak at one of these events. And he said, you know, everybody knows about the miracle about my kid, but very few people ask me the strange thing that the Rebbe asked me among the promises, 1800 to tzedakah, everybody can understand. Give me the good news, everybody can understand. But the name Ben Sion, it's such an unusual thing. And the Rebbe didn't know me from a hole in the wall, and I didn't know him from a hole in the wall. And he said, I want to tell you that when my wife was pregnant with this child, we decided her grandfather was a very saintly person. Her grandfather's name was Ben Sion, and we decided we're going to name this kid Ben Sion. But then, before the baby was born, my father suddenly passed away. And my father suddenly passed away. And so we gave him the name Yaakov Shmuel for my father. And my wife was a little upset, but, you know, that's what we did. And he said, and my wife didn't tell me this, but she told me this later, that at a certain point she had a dream of her grandfather. And her grandfather said, why did you leave me in this place? Why didn't you take me out? And she had a dream also about my father, who came to her and said, thank you so much for giving the kid my name. And so somehow the Rebbe knew about this whole phenomenon. Okay, good. So so what's the whole? Oh, by the way, so Yaakov Shmuel Ben Sion grew up. When I saw the video that I saw, he was already in his 40s. He already had a kid and married with a child. And after the video, I got from another source, he went on to have at least 7 more children. He's a Chabad rabbi. His father became, instead of somebody who opposes Chabad, his father became a Fabrenta, lit up Chassid. And Rabbi Ormland, actually, the younger one, the older one passed away in something like 2013. And the younger one, who's like 60 now, about 60. No, wait. He was born in 1960, so he is like 61, and he's a rabbi in New Jersey. He ran a school in Sfat for young people who wanted to find out about Torah, and now he's back in his home territory of New Jersey, and he's an active rabbi there also for young people. So
did you say he's a Chabad rabbi?
Pardon? He's a Chabad rabbi. Yeah. They're complete Chabadniks. And so anyway, so the point of the story is not just a miracle. The point of the story is, it's a very rare story, because there are thousands of miracle stories about the Rebbe, but extraordinarily rare. Okay, I think I don't know who that is. There are extraordinarily few stories in which the Rebbe let the veil that he wore part, and you could see who he deals with, and where he makes deals. You know, most of the time you just hear miracles. Very rarely does the Rebbe make an admission like, the Gezerah is over. He knows what's going on in heaven. I've heard maybe 4 stories like this. This is it's a very, very rare thing. The Rebbe didn't say me at all. He didn't say I at all. He didn't give a clue about how these miracles took place. But anyway, so it's an extraordinary story. And if the Rebbe could tell this guy, guess what? The Gezerah is over. Your kid is going to live. When the doctors told him, we're insisting that this kid had only 1 hour to live. then if the Rebbe tells us that the Geula is unfolding, we can believe him. We can trust him. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say. And thank you very, very, very much. Okay, and it's a little bit late, so I'm gonna end the class. Does anybody have something they want to say?
I do. It's a small tangent. First of all, hello. It's nice to see you.
Yeah.
I wanted to say, when you were telling the story about the part about needing to blow the shofar and needing to have the wife and possibly another woman hear the shofar as well, that I remembered something I was taught. And the minute I remembered, I realized that you were probably the one who taught it to me years and years and years ago. And it had something to do with the reason we blow the shofar. I always thought, it's to gather the community, to make sure everybody can hear. But you had said it's actually, I'm pretty sure it was you, who said that we do this during the Nila service because it's God blows our breath into us and we blow our breath back to God. And I thought about, you don't remember this?
Not me.
So maybe it wasn't you, but the teaching that I learned was something about how, maybe it was Chaim Levine, I don't know, but it was years and years and years ago during that era of Eish Torah, that somehow God blows his breath into us for life. And when we blow the shofar, we are blowing our breath back to God. I don't know, if that's something you ever.
I know that when we blow the shofar, there's many, many reasons that we blow the shofar. One of them is to wake up our soul. Somehow the shofar is a long forgotten language, and it wakes up the soul if our soul was sleeping, if our soul was not awake enough. And it's also the cry, it goes back the other way. It's the cry of our soul to God. It's like a cry that has no beyond words. It's a cry that, a cry from the soul to, the soul is part of God. And it's a cry from the soul back to its source. So those are two of the main reasons, but there are about a few other reasons.
Wow, that was some story, and of course, who doesn't feel the intensity of that? That was some story. Yeah.
Beautiful story, an amazing story.
I'm gonna put on Facebook. I'm gonna put. At least you'll be able to see. There's a teaser. You can see. You actually have to buy the video. How did I see it? I saw a pirated version. I didn't know it was a pirated version. I saw it on WhatsApp, but then it was taken off because the story has a copyright from Gem, but if you go to Gem store, you can actually buy it, and it's delicious because it's delicious to see the son speaking when he's 40 years old. And it's delicious to see the father. The father speaks in Hebrew only, but with subtitles. And it's just delicious to listen to the story straight from them. So anyway.
Amazing. When you say that tonight is an auspicious night,
tonight is incredible.
What is it auspicious for?
Well, so the Frierdiker Rebbe was released from prison. He was released from prison, and it's a day. It's a day of redemption. It's a day of it's a day when you can be released from whatever binds you. He was under a death sentence, and there was nothing anybody could do except daven to Hashem, do mitzvahs like crazy, and they did they made worldly efforts. They contacted different people who might have influence. They did whatever they could, and although he was in the grip of a force that would not let him go, that really wanted to kill him, in the end, they were forced against their will to let him go. And that's the same thing with us. Gullus, the forces of exile had us captive. But in the end, they are going to have to release us against their will. But they're going to have to release us. Just like in Egypt, they had us completely in their power. And Hashem made the situation that against their will, they had to let us go. So that's what's happening. We're being.
So what should we be praying for? This is a good time to be praying for that we can break free from.
Anything you want. It's a very auspicious day and a very auspicious night, and tomorrow. It continues tomorrow until sunset.
Okay.
Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
God willing, I'll see you soon.
Yes, your Koach.
Thank
God
you.
willing. Thank you. Beautiful story. Thank you both.